What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson. You know, life can dish out some pretty harsh things. And really a lot of just our whole story is what do you do? What do you do with these things? How do you overcome some things? How do you let some things in the past be in the past, but also turn them and maybe make something, or in my view, because I'm a Christian, put them in God's hands and let him make something beautiful out of it. You know, the idea of rising from the ashes. Well, we've got a guest today who I think you're going to find her story very interesting. Currently, she's the founder and CEO of the Good Heart Collaborative, and we'll explain that, do a little show and tell. But she's an entrepreneur. She's done a lot of advocacy work for victims of abuse. She hosts a podcast called the Good Heart Gals. And, you know, she's someone who just she's been dealt a lot of pain, but she refuses to let the pain define her. And she's flipping that around and finding ways to help other people. Her name is Kristen Harness. And I just invite you to be a part of the conversation if you're on chat live right now. And hit share. This would be a good one to inspire some people. Kristen, great to have you on Life Today Live.
Hey, Randy. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So I just want to open it up and let you tell your story because it's a powerful story. And I love the redemption aspect of it. But let me just be quiet and you tell us some of the difficulties that you've gone through, because I think it'll help people understand the power of what you're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love to share my story. I just started sharing it probably about 3 years ago. And I really do it because it's amazing to see, you know, where I'm sitting now at the age of 41 and what God has brought me through, just seeing his beautiful kind of redemption through everything that I've been through. And I also think like there's so many people out there that they're hurting, they're silently struggling. They've been through what I've been through or similar or different things. They're carrying around like guilt and shame. And I don't think the devil wants us sharing our story. I think he wants us to keep those stories of hope and like overcome or the way God helped us overcome. Like, I don't think he wants us sharing that because it gives hope to others. And so I'm like, whatever the devil hates is what I want to do even more. So, you know, I'm just happy to be here to have this opportunity. But if you've been in the Christian world at all for any amount of time, you've heard this before. You can't really have a testimony without the test. And so I like to just kind of share the backdrop, 41 years of my life. I'll sum it up as quickly as I can. But, you know, a lot of it started when I was young. Around the age of 5 is when my mom and dad divorced. My sister was 3. I had witnessed domestic violence before that. And, you know, my dad was in and out of my life. Sometimes there were years that would go by before I would know where he was or what he was doing or before he would check in. And what that did, and it's unfortunately, it's a story that is, you know, all too common. And later on, I'll share about how God, you know, redeemed and restored that situation. But, you know, that caused just a lot of pain inside of me. I was, you know, I didn't have that person in my life, that male figure, that father in my life who is really supposed to be the one who is speaking truth into me about who I am, helping me build up my self-esteem, helping me to feel loved, to feel secure. And so when you have a young girl that doesn't get those things or feel those things, and everybody responds to different types of trauma differently. But for me and for a lot of young girls, what happens is that rejection inside caused me, I'll just stick to me, caused me to, you know, what I say, look for love in all the wrong places. I was looking for that male acceptance, that I was looking for words of affirmation, whatever that looked like, from different male figures in my life, and all of them were pretty much negative, impacts in my life. And so during my teen years, I really struggled with depression, with anxiety. I was diagnosed with depression. I was hanging around gangs. I was hanging around people that were just doing a lot of, destructive things. And I was just really, really broken and heartbroken. And a lot of that outwardly looked like anger and looked like, I didn't care about myself or anybody else. And I didn't really care about myself, but really I was sad, and I was longing for love. And so during that time, I was drinking a lot. I was in a lot of fights. I was, like I said, hanging around the wrong people, also people that were hurting and that were going through a lot of things too, now that I look back. And when I was a young teenager, I was sexually assaulted. I was raped by a stranger in downtown Denver. And all of these traumas just really impacted me. And I didn't tell people about them. I didn't get help for them. They just happened to me, and I kept them inside. I had so much shame, so much guilt. I wanted to just pretend like it didn't happen. But that's just not how our bodies work. That's not how our minds work.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through all of the stuff that I went through, especially sexual trauma, sexual violence, if you've heard that, maybe you've heard this before, but the body keeps score. And so those things, although I was trying to forget, they were not forgettable instances in my life. And they just continue to pile up hurt and pain and grief and loss and sorrow in my life. And I was pretty much at rock bottom around the age of 18. And my mom invited me to a local non-denominational Christian church. And I went with her. I was, drunk from partying the night before. But I went, and I remember this very clearly. I walked through the doors, and the minute I walked through the doors, I just felt this overwhelming presence come over me. And I immediately just broke down crying, and I was just weeping. And it scared me, of course. And so I ran out of the church, and I ran back to the car. And I remember my mom running out there, knocking on the window. And she's like, "That's the Holy Spirit," and I'm freaking out because she's talking about spirits and stuff like that. I'm
Sure.
What the heck just happened? But, and I didn't go back in that day. And so I went back. I was living with some friends in an apartment. And that moment just, oh my gosh, it stuck with me. It just impacted me so much. And so I was like, what just happened to me? I've got to know more about this, because now I look back, I know that it was the love and presence of God.
Yeah, can I ask you a question though? Because you talk about some abuse in the home, but then your mother taking you to church. What happened with her? Was there a point where things in her life were made right?
Yeah, my mom was always a Christian.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. She was a Catholic, and then she was a Christian.
Catholics can be Christians. I know lots of Christian
I know,
Catholics.
I'm trying to say it correctly. She was a practicing Catholic,
Right.
but then she became a practicing Christian, which is just different practices. Am I saying that right?
You say it how you want to say it.
Okay. Well, that's how it was. So she was always had a relationship with God. How about I say that?
Yeah. Yes.
And so that over the years, she obviously went through that trauma of abuse and violence with my dad. But I remember, just as a little girl going to church, and she would have Christian music on in the background. And so that was always there.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I was getting at. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So she had been going to church. And so she found this church, and that she was already attending before she invited me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I wanted more of that. I wanted to understand what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept going back to church, and then I got a Bible, and I was reading my Bible, and, through all of that kind of really difficult process of God really starting to speak to me, God really starting to work on healing my heart and my soul. It was a really challenging process. I lost a lot of friends and all that kind of stuff, but I started attending church there more. And I was approached and asked out by the pastor's son, who was also the worship leader there. And I was like, how is this even possible? Like, why would this godly man, what would he, why does he want anything to do with me? Like, I'm disgusting. I'm gross. I'm all the opposite of what he stands for and represents. Right. That's what I thought and felt. And so I was actually like really blown away. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was very, very vulnerable. Okay. Keep in mind, like I was still very broken and vulnerable is the word. Okay. And I was seeking safety. I was seeking security. I was seeking love. And I was seeking that in this church, because I had felt it. And I was going there as I am, looking for a safe place to be. And unfortunately, this relationship, I ended up, going out with him, and this relationship started off very great in the beginning. There was a lot of good things happening. He was treating me very kindly, not like anybody else had treated me before. However, in all of that, there was also a lot of manipulation. And I'm just going to keep it real and say things straight up. Please. So that I don't have to sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
There was also sexual exploitation going on there. And I say that with a lot of, like, I understand the weight behind saying something like that.
Yeah.
I say that because this person was in a high up position of authority in that church, right? He's the pastor's son. He's the worship leader. And I was this vulnerable young woman coming into this church. And there was just a lot of inappropriate things that began happening within that relationship. And
did you talk to anybody about those? Because anybody outside of the situation would see immediately what's going on, which is taking advantage of a vulnerable, young, attractive, vulnerable girl who's got a past that's, sketchy. Yeah. Anybody, as you know now, anybody outside that would spot that immediately and go, okay, time out. We got to deal with this. Did you talk to anybody?
I mean, no. Why would I talk to anybody?
You didn't know.
I'm the one that's being manipulated here in this situation. Okay. To me, this is familiar. It's abusive, but it's familiar and it's new, and it's supposedly coming from somebody who represents God. So I remember saying to myself, wow, okay, if he thinks this is okay, it must be okay. I said that multiple times, even though I felt in my soul that it was wrong.
Right.
But I was like, okay. And so, no, I didn't talk to anybody. I wanted everything in the world to be in a relationship with this person. Okay. Because I felt like I could be a different person now. Like I could be this pastor's wife. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk to me now. Not the last thing I want to be, but I don't want to be a pastor's wife. Okay. But back then I was like, yes. So anyways,
okay. So how do you get out of that? I mean, you had gotten out of a bad situation outside of the church in the world. You'd found some hope. You had an encounter with God that you knew was real and you knew was good, but then in a church situation, you're back into the abuse and the oppression and the manipulation.
Yeah.
In the most surprising way, and how long did it take you to realize that? How long were you stuck in that?
I'm going to say it was about a year, but it escalated quickly. Okay. And, it started turning really ugly, really nasty. Okay. And I'm not going to get into details about what it was, but it flipped very quickly. And it got to the point where I was being told what I could wear, where I could shop, who I could talk to, who I couldn't talk to.
Jeez. Very,
very controlling. And then I started, finding out that there were several other girls that he was doing to this to as well.
Oh, wow.
At the same time. And he had actually told all of us that he wanted to marry us. And I was looking for dresses. I was picking out rings. I was very excited about all of it. And there were several other girls that were experiencing the same thing in the church. And so all of this started unraveling. Okay, I'm a complete disaster because not only did I bring in all of this junk and trauma that I had, but now I have this additional trauma that is even worse than what I had gone through before because it was done in the name of God, basically.
Right.
Like, I mean,
sure.
I don't want to say in the name of God, but under what is supposed to be this authority of God.
Right.
In this place where I went to go find safety and refuge, but instead I was preyed upon and I was exploited and I was abused in that situation. And I was a complete disaster. My hair was falling out. My face was covered in acne. I had lost a lot of weight. I had this dark cloud on me. And he ended it with me. He broke up with me and I tried everything I could to continue that relationship with him because that's what happens when you have things like trauma bonds and stuff to people, which that's a whole nother show to talk about trauma bonds. But, and so I actually found out that he was doing this to other girls because another woman who this was happening to had contacted me, and it was a disaster.
Yeah. So okay. How did you get out?
So I got out because I had not leadership in the church. Okay. The leadership knew that this stuff was happening and didn't do anything about it. But there were a couple people that were on the worship team that were my friends, and they were praying for me and they were trying to be there for me. And really what happened was I was at the end of my rope and I finally had to make a change. I finally was like, sure, I cannot do this anymore. And so I remember just one day kind of like falling to my knees and praying and being like, okay, God, if this is not the person that you have for me, which clearly it wasn't, but I was so messed up, then help me to release this, you know? Yeah. And so there's so much more I could talk about, but that person, I ended up staying at the church even after that happened for a few years. I was told that it wasn't the will of God for me to leave that church.
Spiritual manipulation. It
was so bad. Yeah. But God got a hold of my heart, and I can't get into all the details because I don't have time. But He took this heavy burden and brokenness off of me. He literally lifted it off of me. And I remember walking into that church one day, and people were looking at me, and they were commenting, and they said, "Wow, you look so light." It's going to make me cry. Because it was a really amazing moment where I was like, I still had all my trauma. I still had all of the baggage. I still had all that stuff going on, but I wasn't carrying around this darkness anymore. I had just, people saw the light, and God was starting to work on me. Okay. So, this couple of years in the process here, I knew that I started healing because God started taking my focus that I had off of me and what I was going through, and started giving me a compassionate heart for other young girls and women that were going through sexual violence, going through exploitation, going through oppression, injustice, all that kind of stuff. And I started just thinking about them. I'm like, what? I got to do something to help. I need people to see that you can be absolutely broken and go through so much hardship, but God can heal you. He's healing me. I wasn't healed, but He's healing me. There's hope for that. And so I actually went on some mission trips, and I went to Pattaya, Thailand, which is 62 miles southeast of Bangkok. And that was in 2004. Okay. September 2004. And so I'm just like trying to do what I can now because I want to show other girls and women that there's hope. Yeah. And we go to Pattaya, Thailand. When I was there, 17 years ago? 70% of the population was involved in the commercial sex industry or in prostitution. It's what's considered a sex tourism city where you have all these Western men there.
Right.
So it changed my life. It was eye-opening. It was my first time I heard about human trafficking. And so I left there thinking I was going to move back to Thailand, and human trafficking, when I started hearing about it and learning about it, I'm like, okay, these are people who have not only gone through sexual abuse and sexual assault day after day after day, rape day after day after day, but somebody else is profiting off of this. And I thought that was just the most evil, disgusting thing that somebody could do. And so that turned my heart really towards specifically helping survivors and raising awareness about sex trafficking and about human trafficking.
Yep.
And so over the years,
Yeah.
this is years in the making, God gave me a vision and I'm serious, I don't really talk about visions and stuff very often, but God gave me a vision in my heart about a safe home for these girls. And I thought that was going to be in Thailand. So I was like trying to arrange it in Thailand. I was trying to figure out what it would look like to open a home there, and door after door was shut. And then I started hearing about in Colorado how sex trafficking was a major problem with kids. There was no home for them to go to, no place for them to find restoration and healing and resources. And so I remember that vision came up in my mind again, and I'm like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is my timing. And so in 2013, I started a nonprofit that offered safe housing and supportive services to young girls that were recovered out of sex trafficking. It was the first in the Denver metro area. And we offered, obviously, the safe housing 24/7, but also mental health treatment. We had a licensed school, community services, life skills. I mean, we did whatever we could, because these girls, a lot of them were even trafficked by their own families. Okay. And so this was the most beautiful thing that I could ever be a part of. Okay. It was something that was quite literally like a dream come true for me.
As someone who had been through abuse in various forms, I mean, just too much, was helping others who had been abused a little bit of your, I don't know if therapy is the right word, but a little bit of kind of kicking back at the abuse that you had been through, to say, I'm not putting up with it, and I'm going to help others not put up with it.
Yeah, it was incredibly healing for me. It was a part of the healing process that God was bringing me through. My healing did not happen right away. I'm still healing,
Sure.
quite frankly.
Sure.
But it was, I felt compelled. My heart was so filled with compassion and so broken. I mean, I spent 6 months basically in my closet, bawling my eyes out after I had learned about human trafficking, because I was so broken about it. And I finally had to wake myself up and be like, okay, I'm not helping anybody sitting in this freaking closet. But I felt like it was a little tiny, like God was kind of giving me a little bit of his heart for these people.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I can't do stuff if it's not like going to actually help people make an impact. Like that's what my nonprofit was. That's what my business is now. It's just how I'm wired now, because I know I hate that the devil is just trying to destroy so many lives, especially girls and women.
Yeah. The vulnerable.
Through sexual abuse and violence. Okay. Because it's just, it hurts so badly and it harms so deeply. And so, yes, it was part of healing for me.
So I get when someone is in the world, they're living apart from God, and bad things are happening, and then they come to God. He meets them where they're at. He starts the healing process. But with you, to be thrust into more abuse inside the church, how did you separate the church people who were obviously 180 degrees opposite of God's will from God?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that, because I wanted to bring that up and I forgot. The only explanation is the grace of God, because I never, and I can say the word never, I never equated what these people were doing with God. Okay. And that's the unfortunate thing is a lot of people do, and I don't blame them. It is so understandable. They had a really negative experience with the
Right.
Christian leadership. They were abused or treated poorly, whatever. And so to them, that's God, right?
Right.
And then they don't trust God. They don't want to know anything about him. And I understand that, but I'm just so thankful that by God's grace, like I never thought that. I never, like you said, I never equated that person's behavior with who God was. In fact, it drew me closer to God. And some people could say like, well, why would God let you go through that? You know?
Sure. Good
Well,
question.
that's the question we ask about everything, right? Why does God allow children to be sex trafficked?
Yeah.
Why does God allow a child who has people praying over them and believing parents to die from cancer?
Right.
I mean, there's so many questions why we're not going to know the answer to. Why did God allow me to go through that? I don't know, because we're freaking broken people, right? But I'm just really thankful that that didn't happen, that I was able to grow closer with him. And so through all of that, you know, like I said, I opened up this nonprofit. It was amazing work. It was beautiful, but it was also one of the hardest things I've ever done. I did not take care of myself. I was 100% in all the time through this hard work, through other people's trauma, right? Listening to what girls are going through. Working in the nonprofit world is like crap in a lot of ways too, very stressful. Working in social services, all these different things, right?
Yep.
And so that process like almost destroyed me, and I got incredibly burned out, and I had to end up leaving the nonprofit last year, transitioning out in order just to heal and to work on my own health and well-being. And now that's what I do with Good Heart Collaborative. I started a tech business to help other women that are working in helping fields, women, because I'm just so fascinated by people, but by women who, you know, have dedicated like their careers, their education, their lives and their time to helping others. And a lot of them, like myself, it's because we've been through something ourselves and we've been able to overcome, and now we want to give back. And that's like, to me, the most amazing story of redemption. And that's why I sit here today. And that's why I love having the opportunity to share. Like, you can go through all of these things or worse, but God can absolutely heal you. He can take what the devil wanted to use to destroy you, and he can use it for good, and he will use it for good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't define the rest of your life, you know?
So what's interesting is that you go from being abused to helping those who have been abused. And now God's put you in another season of life where you're helping the helpers.
Yeah.
So people who are doing what you did for a decade or more and helping those who have been victimized, they actually need some support. And you're filling that role. I want to show people your website. This is goodheart.app is actually the URL. I'll throw that in the chat for you guys that are watching the chat. But goodheart.app. And this is something that you're in testing. It will be launching soon. Tell us what you're using the technology as well as your podcast to try to achieve to help those who are in the helping business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I started is because, you know, it's such a hard job. It's so hard to be there in people's suffering and in pain and in trauma, and to, you know, run to that instead of running away. And so it gets very lonely, and you go through a lot of hard things. And I experienced that. And so I'm like, are other women experiencing this? And there were so many other women that I was hearing about all over the world, and men too, of course.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I got to do something to help these women. And at first I was going to bake like gift baskets and send them like, just, hey, like, you're not alone. You're amazing. Like, I know you don't get appreciated, and you're not paid the way you should be, and you work crazy hours and all this and that, but I see you and you're valuable and you're amazing. And I realized that was a logistical nightmare. And so my husband has a 17 year tech background. I got the story, the business acumen. And so I'm like, what's the best way to reach these women? And the most efficient way to reach them all over the world. And it was through technology. And so we've been developing an app for, it seems like 10 years now, but I think it's been like 18 months. And so in this app, it's just filled with evidence-based and biblically guided resources to help you be in that field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's through learning new ways to cope with the stress and anxiety, ways to reduce stress and anxiety, reminders about what God says, about his strength for you, and how he's the one empowering you to do the work that he's called you to do. I mean, the times are even crazier now for people in this field.
Right.
Okay. Like what first responders, healthcare, all these people are dealing with right now, it's absolutely out of control and unacceptable. And so I'm just hoping that this will be like, one tool that they can use to just find support in there. There's a prayer wall in there. There's opportunities for self-care reminders, because the last thing helpers do is take care of themselves most of the time, because they're always available for other people.
Right.
And so this is just several different things all in this amazing app. It is a subscription-based app, $6.99 a month. God willing, I'm relaunching it because I did some new fun stuff with it, relaunching it on November 1st.
Okay, so keep an eye on that. You can check that out at goodheart.app if you're in the helping field and you need a little support yourself. There's some for you. Kristen, I want to thank you for sharing your story, first of all.
Yeah.
I know that's not easy, and even trying to condense it into a half-hour show. I mean, there's just too much.
Hard.
But here's what I'd like to leave people with. And so I just want to ask you, someone who has had, whether it's abuse or what other kind of suffering in their lives, and they think that that's it. I mean, their life is defined by that. They experienced so many failures, they've kind of just given up. You haven't. You have always pushed forward, and God has redeemed a lot of the pain. And it is a process. To say that all the time on the program, it is a journey, and you don't get there overnight. And it's not always easy. But what do you say to someone who thinks God could never use me in that way? I could never. I'm done. I'm defined, and it's not good.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you're exactly the person that God can use. You're exactly the person who can be used to help others. And I'm telling you, I didn't get to talk about everything that I have felt, experienced, gone through, but I have been through some deep, dark pain. And I was able to overcome that through God, only through God. I really, he brought other means and people and stuff, but it was through him. And so I just want you to know, it sounds cliche, but if it can be something that I've experienced and it can happen to me, it can absolutely happen to you. And I would say the first part of that is to just talk to somebody about it, because I think that is where you start gaining some power, is because you can't continue to deny that this stuff happened. You've got to face it. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to face what you went through. But if you don't face it and you don't accept it and you don't acknowledge it, it's just going to sit. It's going to continue to just sit there and fester and build up. And so you got to acknowledge it. Yes, you went through it, but it's not who you are and it's not the rest of your life. Okay. Yep. So face it, talk to somebody, and then you can start moving forward in that healing process, and God will use it.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. Love what you're doing, using your business acumen in a way that's going to help other people. And I hope the launch goes well. Having been in tech for many years now, I know it can be bumpy, so be patient. But check out goodheart.app, and you can see what's going on and find out maybe how it can help you or help someone you love. So again, Kristen, thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Appreciate you guys hanging out, watching, hitting share, hitting follow, and subscribe, and like, and all those things. Again, check out goodheart.app. Looks just like that for now, but it'll be changing here as they get into their launch month next week. We'll see. And, come back. We got more for you right here on Life Today Live, so we'll see you here next time.
Same to you, the same to every man, Jew and Gentile and Mohammedan, whether they believe it or not. We float on this vast, limitless sea of divine mercy.